chapter 6. The book of Matthew, chapter 6. Tonight we are continuing our study on the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount covers all of chapter 5, all of chapter 6, and all of chapter 7. So you're thinking, wow, we've been in chapter 5 forever, it feels. Yes, we have. But we are going to walk through the next couple chapters very quickly. We spent 6 weeks on chapter 5 alone. Okay, we've been in chapter 5 for 6 weeks. But chapter 6 will be in only for 2 weeks. Chapter 7 will only be 2 weeks, and then we're going to be done. So we are almost through with this. Okay, we are on the back side of this. Okay, so almost done. But let's recap what all we've covered in chapter 5, and you'll see why we walked through it so slowly. I have them on the screen. The first thing that we talked about is how to experience the presence of the Lord through all stages of your life. Then it was how to influence others and lead them to salvation. That we are to avoid violence, bullying, and name-calling. We are to avoid every kind of sexual sin. We are to tell the truth at all times. We are to give to others above what is being asked of us. And last week we looked at how we are to love and pray for our enemies. That's just chapter 5. There's a lot in chapter 5. Who's teaching the Sermon on the Mount? Jesus, right? So he's giving us a lot to kind of think about, a lot to live by, a lot of challenges. Okay? Again, the Sermon on the Mount is Jesus defining what it looks like to be a Christian. So Christians are to be these things. You are to avoid these things. And so that's kind of what he's kind of laying out before us. So it kind of helps us to kind of see where we're at, right? So we're going to get into chapter 6 tonight. Our message is about the difference between a genuine believer and a fake, someone who has a fake relationship with Jesus. So that's the kind of two things that we're going to start with. So Jesus spends all of chapter 5 on teaching the Old Testament law, how it can transform us, not just change how we behave, right? That was the whole point of chapter 5. It's not just about, hey, we're going to change how we behave. It's, hey, we're going to look at God differently, right? We're going to understand what the Bible is really trying to show us. Understand that he's calling us to more than just behaving the right way, right? The Lord is concerned about what we think, how we feel, what we look at, what we listen to, what we do, what our intentions are, and how we respond. So he's going a lot further than just, hey, I want you to behave this way. He's saying, I want you to think this way. I want you to see the world this way. I want you to listen to this and avoid that. So there's a lot going on, more than just, hey, behave this way. Now it's, hey, think like this. And it's just a lot deeper. This is what it's showing us, is that there's a lot more to Christianity than just coming to church and trying to act right. There's so much more to this, right? So he's calling us into a deeper relationship. This is how we interact with the world. So our outward behaviors are to be an overflow of the inward transformation that we receive from Christ coming in and ruling in our lives. That's the whole point of the Sermon on the Mount. The way we think, the things that we do, all this should be an overflow of what God has done inside of us. So Jesus is going to use a very simple test tonight to determine whether someone has a genuine relationship with him or a fake relationship with him. A very simple test. It's going to really boil down to motivations. Okay? So you see, correct actions with incorrect motivations is still not pleasing to God. So just doing the right thing, but if we do the right thing for the wrong reason, that's still not the right thing. You guys see what I'm saying about that? You guys understand what I mean? Right? So let's do this. So like if you have a sibling, and your mom or you guys get into it, and your mom's like, tell each other you're sorry. What do? Sorry. No. Oh, do you mean it? No. Are you doing the right thing? Yeah. Are you doing it for the right reason? No. So that's kind of what Jesus is saying here, right? It's about doing the right thing for the right reason, not just because, I just have to, now, if I'm going to believe in God, I just have to do this, and I can't do this. And, no, that's not what it's about. It's not just about following Jesus and doing the right thing because you have to. It's about the fact that I have a relationship with Christ, and because of that, it's an overflow. I want to do these things. I want to be obedient to him. I want to help others. I want to pray. I want to read my Bible. Why? Not because I have to, but because I want to, because it's an overflow of the way he has changed my life. Okay, so Jesus is going to stress the importance of righteous behavior when no one but God is watching. Because that's the thing. If this is where we're a Christian, but not at school, God's calling us. He's inviting us to more than that. There's more to it than that. Right? He's going to declare that a fake relationship is righteous behavior for human praise rather than righteous behavior to glorify God. What he's saying is to act right. I'm not going to behave, or what he's saying is I don't want you to behave just so that you can show off to other people. I want you to behave and do the right thing because you want to glorify me. The entire theme of the Sermon on the Mount is God is calling you to more than just following the rules. There's more to Christianity than just following the rules. There's so much more he's calling us, inviting us into. So what exactly does Jesus mean when he talks about righteous behavior for human praise rather than to glorify God? That's what we're going to read tonight. So that's where we're going to start. Matthew chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. If you don't have a Bible, I have it on the screen. Again, this is Jesus speaking. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. Otherwise, you have no reward with your Father in heaven. So whenever you give to the poor, don't send a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, to be applauded by people. Truly, I tell you, they have their reward. But when you give to the poor, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Who is Jesus giving the Sermon on the Mount to? Is he talking to big crowds? Who's he talking to? His disciples. He's talking to his disciples. So that's, be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others, just to be seen by them. He says, guys, this is about motivation. You're going to follow me, but I don't want you to do this just to be seen by other people. I want you inviting them to motivation, to consider their motivation. Okay? So, let's break down verse 1. So we truly understand what Jesus is saying, and I want to be very careful to understand what he's not saying. In verse 1, Jesus says, do not practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. So the question is, should we act like a Christian in front of other people? Yeah. Yes, we should. Is that what Jesus is talking about here? No, that's not what he's saying. He's not saying, hey, don't act like a Christian in front of people. You don't want to do that. That's not what he said at all. So here's what he is saying. Jesus is talking about don't practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. What he's saying is do not act like a Christian only when other Christians are around. Again, this boils down to motivation. The question becomes, what drives your obedience? So look at the examples that Jesus gives. Because when you give to the poor, don't sound a trumpet before you. What would that look like for us today? To sound a trumpet before you give to the poor? What he's basically saying is, it's not necessary to get everybody's attention. Don't get everybody's attention before you do something nice for somebody. That's not necessary, right? It's not necessary to parade that around and be like, hey, everybody watch this, and then go, it's just not necessary to get all that, bragging about it to others. That's not what he's talking about here, right? Just sounding trumpets, making sure everyone watches you as you are helping other people. The last disciple now that we had was like 2 years ago. We handed out food boxes. I don't know if, was anybody part of that? Who was here for that? So we got several, okay? So we handed out food boxes to a poor neighborhood in Shelbyville. So here's what we did, right? I called the manager of the property and got permission to hand out the boxes. So that's the first thing, right? I got to get permission. That's called trespassing when you're an adult. You can't just walk up at somebody's property, right? Lori made a list of items of food that we were going to get at Kroger to make sure that what we provided for them was actually in the box. Meaning, we want to make sure that, we don't want to give them spaghetti and then, not give them sauce. You know what I mean? So you don't want to give them, part of a meal, but not all of it, right? So she had to make sure that, think that through. Okay, what meals can we actually give them to where they don't need anything else? If they have nothing else in their kitchen, everything they're going to need for, it's like a week's worth of meals. We give them a week's worth of meals in a box.
The boxes were very heavy.
And the boxes were heavy, right? But everything they needed for all 7 of those meals were in that box. They did nothing else except that. So that took some really good creativity from Lori to think that through. We got people to donate boxes. In fact, we still have boxes left over from that. We made a flyer that went inside the box that shares the love of Jesus, why we're giving the box, where the box came from, inviting them to church, what our church times were, all that. The day before we handed out the flyers, here's what you guys don't know. The day before we went to hand it out, I made flyers that I went door to door, knocked on every door that we were going to knock on every door, either handed them a flyer of what we're doing or taped it to their front door. Because what I don't want to do is have a bunch of us walking down the street of some neighborhood unannounced, and they're like, what in the world are they doing? Right? So I wanted to give the residents a heads up of, hey, tomorrow at this time, we're coming to this house, and we're going to give out this food if you want it. And so it was all of that information. So I wanted to give the residents a heads up, so that way they knew what we were doing, what we were bringing, when to expect us. If you were with us, you probably remember invading Kroger late at night, right? We all broke up into teams.
Oh my God, almost midnight?
It was almost midnight. It was late, and we went in there and just ravaged, right? They were in there stocking shelves, thinking.
It was like we were done.
Yeah.
Because we were on teams running around in groups.
Yeah. So they had everybody stocking the shelves, right, getting the store ready for the morning, and we just messed their whole day up. So that's what we did. So we invaded Kroger, got the items that we needed. We made an assembly line. You guys remember lining the boxes up like the whole length of this building, and we were all putting stuff in to make sure everything got with it. We loaded the vans up. We drove to the neighborhood. We literally walked door to door, knocked on doors, and handed out boxes of food. But here's what else happened. We prayed with people. There was one family who had just gotten back from a funeral. And they were actually walking in their home as we walked up. And we were able to actually walk in their home and hand them food boxes and pray with them. There was another young lady. She was about my age, who was, I call her young, because she is my age. I'm not going to call her old, okay? So she was there, and she was cleaning out her dad's apartment. He had just passed away, so she was there to clean out all of his stuff. Prayed with her, gave her some food as well, because she literally said there's nothing here. So she was able to benefit from that. So there was even one person who was skeptical. Right, so he was handed a box, and his response was, what do I got to do for this? Do I got to sign up for something? Is there something you're selling me? What do I have to do to get the box? And we used that opportunity to share salvation. We said, well, there's nothing that you got to do, right? You don't owe anything. It's just like salvation. You don't have to pay us anything or do anything. All you have to do is accept the gift that's being given to you, right? So that's how we kind of played that off, right? Now, here's the thing where this could have turned really weird. What if I had called the Times-Gazette, the newspaper in Shelbyville, and said, hey, on Saturday, we've got this group who's going to go hand out all this food. You guys should do an article about it, and we put it in the paper, and just kind of be, this is going to be awesome. I want everyone to know that. Would that be appropriate? No, that's not necessary, right? That's not necessary to do that. Now, we did put it on Facebook after, along with all of our other Disciple Now stuff. We posted all kinds of stuff all weekend long about that. We didn't post about that, but the people who were involved in that, it was our church. Our church were the ones who were cheering us on, celebrating that, not to give us credit and tell us how awesome we are, but rather to celebrate the fact that we're actually reaching our community. Okay, so it's not about getting credit for the things that we do. See, Jesus talks about motivation of being applauded by the people, then this isn't about receiving praise from others. So if our motivation is to just impress other people, that shouldn't be our motivation. See, in Jesus' time, some people would give to the poor just to show off how much money they had. That was their goal. I'm going to show everybody how much money I truly have by giving all of this money to the poor. They would give in such a way that the money coins would actually make noises in the cans, so that way people could see and hear how much money they were giving. I mean, it was like to that point. It was there to show off and to brag about how much money they can give, and for everyone to see and hear what they were doing. And Jesus is saying, if that's what you're looking for, to be impressive to other people, then when you receive that, that is going to be your reward, because God's not interested in it. So maybe you're thinking, really? God's not interested in me giving to the poor? Well, He's interested in your motivation. Obedience matters. You've heard me say this before. Obedience matters, but what drives you to obedience matters even more. Your motivation is even more important than what you're doing. So Jesus commands us to give in such a way that other people have no ability or opportunity to praise us for what we do. We have to reject the sin of pretending to honor God when in fact we're just trying to steal the attention away from Him and put it on ourselves. You see, because that credit that we want for giving to the poor, that credit is actually given to God. So when we try to take that, we're actually stealing it from Him and trying to take it upon ourselves. And this command is the opposite of something we've already studied in Matthew 5:16. I have this on the screen. Jesus said earlier in Matthew 5, in the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. So in Matthew 5:16, Jesus says, let your righteousness shine in front of others, so that they may see your good works. But in Matthew 6, Jesus says, do not practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. This kind of sounds like Jesus can't make his mind up, right? He's kind of saying both. Do it, but then don't do it. What's the difference of these two verses? It's all about motivation. Matthew 5. Let your righteousness shine in front of others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. So Jesus is saying that our righteousness and our obedience should lead others to give glory to God. In Matthew 6, the motivation that we are to avoid is our righteousness leading others to glorify us. So again, we have to reject the sin of pretending to honor God, when in fact all we're trying to do is steal the attention away from Him and put it on ourselves. See, we can actually do the things that God calls us to do and do them the completely wrong way. There's a way to actually give to the poor that God's not interested in. So there's things that we can actually do that God is actually not interested in because we would be doing it the wrong way. I love what Jesus says in verse 4. He says, your Father who sees in secret will reward you. See, because this really does expose motivations. At the end of the day, why would we give to the poor? At the end of the day. Well, why are we called to do that? Right, to help other people, right? But why do we help other people? What's our motivation for helping other people?
Because God did it for us.
Because He did it for us, right? So that's a great point. So it really boils down to the fact that we want to honor God, we want to glorify God. So what do? We give to the poor. And we give to those in need. That's the reward. If the Lord's reward for you remains a secret, meaning you are rewarded by the Lord in a way that no one else will ever know what you did, is it good enough to know that God knows? If you do something that no one else will ever know, but God alone knows, is that good enough? Is that good enough motivation? So here's a real life North Fork Baptist Church experience of what I'm talking about. When YEC rolled around this year, it was a free event, right? But YEC was selling shirts for like $10. So the shirts weren't a requirement. You didn't have to have a shirt to go to the YEC party, right? So we had someone who walked up to us and asked us how many students did not sign up for a shirt. Because not everyone signed up for a shirt. And we told them the number of people that didn't have a shirt. And then they handed us enough cash to pay for a shirt for every single student. So every student that went to YEC had a shirt. Whether they paid for it or not, whether they wanted one or not, we ordered enough for everyone. Because this person came forward and offered us cash for every single person who didn't sign up for a shirt. And you know what the last thing they said was? They said, don't tell anybody. I'll give you this money, but you got to promise me you won't say anything. Why? Because their motivation was to provide for every single student. Their motivation was just to glorify God, not to get the glory for themselves. They don't even want you to know who it was. Because they don't want the credit for that. Because they were doing it for the right reasons. And they're not even associated with this youth group. I would dare say most of you in this room don't even know them by name. Okay? So they just walked up to us out of the blue. How many names you got? It was a few. They handed us quite a bit of money. Here you go. Make sure everybody gets one. So we're going to continue reading this section. This section is about our motivation when it comes to prayer. So we're still speaking through motivation. Verses 5, reading down through verse 15. When you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites, because they love to pray standing in the synagogue and on the street corners to be seen by people. Truly I tell you, they have their reward. But when you pray, go into your private room, shut the door, and pray to your Father who is in secret. And here's that line again. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. When you pray, don't babble like the Gentiles, since they imagine they'll be heard for their many words. Don't be like them, because your Father knows the things you need before you ask Him. Therefore, you should pray like this. Our Father in heaven, your name be honored as holy. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And do not bring us into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For if you forgive others their offenses, your heavenly Father will forgive you as well. But if you don't forgive others, your Father will not forgive your offenses. So Jesus says, don't pray standing in the synagogues, in the street corners. Does that mean public prayer is wrong? Is it wrong for me to stand up here and pray in front of you guys? Is that what he's saying? No, that's not what he's saying. Again, Jesus is focusing on motivation because he says people are doing this to be seen by others. But then Jesus says, don't babble like the Gentiles. What does the word babble mean? Huh? Brag. It's a good word for it. What else? There's actually several meanings for it.
Is it speaking in tongues?
Could be. That is actually another use of it. Right? How about just a bunch of nonsense? How about just the fact that you just talk so long and use a bunch of unnecessary words? You ever talk to somebody who like the conversation just won't stop? Like all I'm trying to do is go to this conversation. And they won't stop. Right? And you're like, that's kind of what they're talking about with babbling, right? Just long-winded, keep on talking, won't hush, kind of like what I'm doing. Right? So that's why Jesus is using this word. It says that it's unnecessary to have long prayers. Is what he's saying. It's unnecessary to have long prayers. Why do you think he's teaching about that? Well, why do you think Jesus would teach that it's unnecessary to have long prayers? I mean, wouldn't you think that'd be a good thing? So why is Jesus saying it's not necessary to have long prayers? He actually uses the word babble.
Because he knows what you're thinking, so he knows everything that you need from us. So just pray long prayers so that everyone around them.
Right. Right. Jesus says that God already knows what you need before you even ask. So if you're just sitting around using long prayers out loud trying to impress other people, that's completely unnecessary because, your prayer is not to other people. Your prayer is to God. So it's not necessary if you are praying in such a way to impress other people with your words. But you see how silly that is? Like, I'm going to pray to God, but at the same time, I'm going to try to impress the people who are listening. Like, that's so silly. Like, that's so just against the point. It has nothing to do with prayer, right? So we don't pray to God to impress other people. We pray to God to communicate. So Jesus is teaching us that God is pleased with simple, direct, and sincere prayers. So that alone proves that each one of us knows how to pray. So if you're sitting here thinking like, I don't really know how to pray, like I know I should, but I don't really know how. Well, Jesus is saying right here, it's very simple. God is pleased with simple, direct, short, simple communication to God. It doesn't have to be like, okay, God, thank you for, just start hitting a list of like a million things before you kind of get to what you need. Like, that's not how it is. It can be so simple. God, I know I'm about to walk into this test. I'm a little nervous about it. Just be with me. That's it. It ain't going to be like, dear Jesus. You're going to do all that. Just open your line of communication. Just talk to him. Don't make it complicated. That's what Jesus is saying. Don't make it complicated. That's just not necessary. Make it simple. Just like you would talk to a friend. Just like you would talk to a parent. It's very simple. Talk to them the exact same way. And I know some people will say that just doesn't sound respectful. No, that's what he's teaching right here. Just simple, direct, short prayers is just as good as those who get up there. It is actually better those who get up there and give long, extravagant, big word prayers. So then Jesus gives us what has become known to us as the Lord's Prayer. Jesus says, don't pray like the hypocrites. Don't pray like the Gentiles. He says, pray like this. And, really breaking down the Lord's Prayer is a sermon all on its own. So, what Jesus does do here is he gives us an example that God is pleased with simple, direct, and sincere prayers. So The Lord's Prayer, there's nothing in this that Jesus says, you got to memorize this, and when you pray, you say these exact words. Our Father who art in heaven. No, that's not what he's saying here. He's not saying memorize the Lord's Prayer and say this to me. It's an example that God is pleased with simple, direct communication to God. Okay? So that's really all that the Lord's Prayer really boils down to. So let's read the last section tonight very quickly, verses 16 through 18. Whenever you fast, don't be gloomy like the hypocrites, for they make their faces unattractive, so that their fasting is obvious to people. Truly I tell you, they have their reward. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that your fasting isn't obvious to others, but to your Father who is in secret. And here it is again, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. So every section tonight has had that line. There's no need to do things for other people to see you. The Lord who sees in secret knows what you're doing, and he will reward you accordingly. So what is fasting? You talked about it at supper tonight. What's fasting?
Where you don't eat for a couple of days?
Yeah, you just don't eat, right? So you skip a meal, right? It can actually be other things other than food. Primarily it's food. But it's just where you just don't eat for a certain amount of time, and you focus your thoughts on God. It's a form of worship. As you feel hungry, it serves as a reminder of your need for him in your life. It's really all that fasting boils down to. I've known some churches who participate in a fast together, meaning everyone in the church is fasting for in a certain way, whether it's we're going to skip lunch or breakfast or whatever. They'll kind of pick a day or pick a meal, and they'll do that together. We have never done that here. No plans to do that here. Look at me, I'm not skipping meals. Okay? I'm out, right? I'm out. I do not worship that. I worship God through food, okay? Not the opposite of that. So here's the thing, guys. Now, fasting is something that, if it's going to be done, it should be done in private. Okay, that should be a private thing. Fasting is about worship. It's not a form of dieting. It's not a means to help you lose weight. That's the wrong way to fast. So if you hear, oh, I can do that? Well, that sounds great. I'm going to do that. No. Listen to me very carefully. Fasting is not about dieting. It's not about losing weight. That is the wrong way to fast. This is about worship. Again, motivation matters. So let's understand that. Motivation matters. Jesus says that the hypocrites make their faces unattractive. My Bible also adds the words saying their faces are unrecognizable and disfigured. So they are purposefully changing their appearance so that everyone will know that they're fasting. It's their way of just promoting it. So they're using fasting as a way to show others just how spiritual I am. Right? So they'll do things with their faces that way everyone will recognize. So I'm holier than you because I'm fasting. Jesus says this. He says, put oil in your hair, wash your face. That sounds crazy to us. This is what that means at their time. He says, don't change your appearance. Groom yourself the same way you would every day. So what he's saying is, regardless of how you pursue God, regardless of how you worship him, it is not necessary to put that on display for everyone else to see. It's not necessary. Now, should we act like a Christian in front of other people? Yeah. But he's saying, don't go to these extremes to where I knew we dropped something, right? So, bing. Right? So that's what he's saying, right? He's just don't change your appearance. Don't make it obvious to people. Don't try to brag and try to act like you're better than everybody else. That's what he's kind of talking about here. I've seen pictures on social media of people's, and I know this is innocent, but I've seen pictures on social media where people have their Bibles and their devotionals and their paper and their pencil, the commentaries, dictionaries, post-it notes, right? A cup of coffee, right? What's the point of doing a devotional if people don't know you're doing it, right? I mean, that's the whole thing, right? So they put it on social media, and it shows their desk is just covered with all this Jesus stuff, and their kitchen table is just covered with, look at all the stuff I'm studying. Listen, guys, I got a Bible study. I got a Bible I got a plan where I'm reading through the Bible this year. I've got a devotional. I've got a journal. I prepare sermons. None of that needs to be seen by others. Why? Because I don't do those things. I don't do those things for other people. I do those things in pursuit of the Lord, right? Not so I can make other people think like I'm just a better Christian than you because look at all the stuff that I do. Right? I don't do it for that reason. Okay? I'm not trying to make other people feel like they're just not a good enough Christian because they don't do all that I do. There are things that I do because I need to focus on the Lord daily. And if I don't do those things, I'm going to be what Jesus describes as the hypocrites. I want to be the one who does the things, and I'm going to do them for the wrong reasons if I don't for real focus myself. Because, guys, I've been guilty of that before. All right? I have let other people build me up and puff me up and, make me feel like I'm really doing something when I have no control of what happens out here, basically. This is the overflow of the Holy Spirit working, okay? This is not having to do anything with me. But I've fallen into that trap of, no, look at what I'm doing. Look at what I'm building. This is awesome. I am really accomplishing stuff. God really needs me because look at what we're doing here. I've fallen into that, right? So it's a lot easier than you think, okay, to do things for the wrong reasons. So I have learned that there are certain things I have to do in my pursuit of the Lord, or I'm going to fall into this category of the hypocrites. So there's things I've got to make sure that I keep in check on myself. So the Sermon on the Mount, guys, is all about motivation. Every piece of it that we're looking at tonight is all about the motivation. It's about not just doing the right thing, but doing the right thing for the right reasons. So Jesus is calling you to more than just following the rules. He wants you to actively pursue Him because you love Him. That's the goal. There's no greater motivation than the glory of God. What else could we want than for God to realize what we're doing so that He could use us even more? See, because if God's not going to use the hypocrites, He's not going to use those that are not doing things for their own reasons. So, what could be a greater motivation than the fact that we have an opportunity to glorify God? And we have an ability and opportunity to actually lift Him up. There should be nothing greater than that. Who cares what other people at school think? What does God think? What's His opinion? What's His view of me? That's what we got to be concerned with, and lifting Him up has got to be our motivation. All right, let's pray.